Hi, welcome to State of Alaska Department of Labor's interviewing workshop. My name is Sarah. Today we're going to talk about how to give your best interview. This presentation will be in 3 parts: an introduction to the interviewing process, ideas about the kind of questions to expect and how to handle answering them, and finally we'll touch a little on what you are saying that you are not saying, also known as nonverbal communication. Before I go on to the next slide, take a minute to think about the purpose of an interview in the job application process. What's an interview for? Well, interviews help you and the employer see if you're good for each other. Aside from the words that you used in your application materials, the interview allows the employer to get a feel for you and gives you the chance to get a feel for your future supervisor or coworkers. The words you used on your application materials got you to the interview, and now it's time for the employer to learn less tangible things about you. Personal traits are how you come across. Are you thoughtful and introspective? Are you bubbly and outgoing? Are you quiet or boisterous? No answer is incorrect, as an organization might want a variety of people. Interpersonal traits are how you interact with other people. Communication style has to do with your verbal communication, words you use and how you use them, as well as nonverbal communication, what you are saying to people through your body language and appearance. Work habits are how you conduct yourself in the workplace. Are you aware of your coworkers and their habits? Do you make compromises? Do you enjoy a neat workspace? Or do you work better with a bit of clutter? These 4 intangible aspects are interrelated. How you are internally affects people around you. There's no one right way to be in these areas. One employer may be looking for one kind of work habit, while another may be interested in something completely different. In the interview, be yourself, but be the best version of yourself. The interview process will begin as soon as you get the call that you're invited to an interview. Between getting that call and attending the interview, you will research for the interview, prepare yourself for questions and the setting, participate in the interview, and finally follow up with the interviewer or interviewers. It's likely that you did some research as you made your application materials. So if you get an interview, you can build on that research. Research just means that you're finding out as much as you can about a job and the organization. A lot of clues are in the job announcement itself. Visit the organization's website if they have one and see if you can find something like a mission statement. Get a feel for the organization's design preferences. If the organization provides services, find materials they provide to customers. If it's possible, you can visit the location in person in order to get a feel for the physical space, as well as the people who work there or the customers. The purpose of research is to develop an idea of how you can fit into the organization and what you can bring to them that supports missions or a company culture that they already have in place. Try to imagine yourself working there. What excites you? What are you a little worried about or unsure about? To prepare for an interview, you want to anticipate questions and practice answers, but you also want to test all of your equipment. Read the job announcement carefully to see what materials you should bring to the interview. When you get the call for the interview, you can also ask if there are any additional materials the interviewers would like you to bring. Assemble all your materials in advance to give yourself time in case of technical glitches. It's also fine to bring some notes and a notepad or pen and pencil for taking notes. The interview will usually consist of questions or question-like activities. The job announcement is usually your best friend as far as anticipating questions, but there will also likely be more general questions that don't at first appear to be about the job specifically. These are usually intended to get a feel for your personality and work habits. Some questions are not really worded like questions, but instead offer you a hypothetical or past scenario to talk about. For example, you might be asked to talk about a time when. Stay aware that the employer is trying to see how you handle a specific situation. Remember what job you are applying for and circle all your answers back to the qualities, competencies, and duties that you understand the job to require. We'll talk a little bit more about questions later in the workshop. At the end of an interview, you're usually invited to ask questions of the interviewers, and these questions can help you learn more about the position and the hiring process. It's a good idea to prepare a few questions ahead of time, but it can also be a good idea to pick up on something said during the interview itself and craft a follow-up question. Finally, you can ask if the interviewers would like you to clarify or expand on anything that you brought up in the interview or anything from your written application materials. If your interview will be by phone or an online video service, make sure to test your equipment in the location you will be interviewing from. Make sure you have enough cell service in that location. If it's going to be a video interview, test how you look in the clothes you will be wearing against the backdrop of your location. It's a good idea to do a test call with a friend. It might even help you to record a test call or video in order to evaluate your own verbal and nonverbal presence. Now it's time for your interview. It's extremely important not to be late. Make sure you know where you need to go for your interview if it's in person. If your interview is in person, it really does begin as soon as you arrive at the location of the interview. Be friendly and polite to everyone you meet along the way. Be aware that there are cameras everywhere. Make sure you have the phone number and code, if there is one, available and ready to go before interview time if it's a virtual interview. Make sure your phone or other device is fully charged or plugged in. Display confidence with your voice and appearance. Remember that you are having an interview because they are interested in you. Pay attention to the interviewers' names, and if you can, their positions in the organization. It's okay to write some notes during the interview as long as you're not with your head down writing notes through the whole thing. Be sure to answer all of the questions. An answer that sort of sidesteps a question but does provide information is still better than not answering at all. Pick up on a key word or idea of the question and find some way to talk about it. Be yourself in the interview because you are what got you there. We'll talk more specifically about questions and answers again later in the workshop. Be sure to thank the interviewers for their time and the opportunity to meet with them. Ask for business cards if you're in person. If you're not in person, you can ask for the interviewers to provide their names with spellings to you at the end. Write a simple note to each interviewer thanking them. Express your continued interest in the job. Send the thank you note as soon after the interview as possible. You might have been the last candidate interviewed, and so you want to make sure your thank you is received before decisions are made. You can email the thank you, or you can drop cards off at the employer's location. If you are unable to get business cards from them, you can usually look up contact information at the organization's website, or you can call a front office person, and ask for the email address that way. It's a really small thing, but it might be a deciding factor, and sending a thank you is very unlikely to harm your prospects for employment as long as you spell people's names correctly and proofread your letter carefully. I'm going to talk now about types of interviews, general employer questions you might expect, and how to anticipate questions based on your research, as well as how to ask effective questions, including what questions you might want to avoid. There are many types of interviews you might participate in. Sometimes there will be a preliminary phone screening with just a few questions, and then more detailed in-person interview. A preliminary screening might be 2 to 3 questions asked of many applicants in order to narrow the candidate pool before the main interview. Sometimes in-person interviews take the form of video calls. The preliminary screening call may only have one person asking questions, while most frequently a main interview will be a panel of people, maybe 2 to 4, asking you questions. A group interview may have several candidates meeting together or calling in on a conference call or a conference video call. Each candidate will be asked the same or similar questions, and the whole group hears all the answers. An extended interview is an interview that might have several steps, such as different meetings with different levels of staff in the organization, or a lunch or dinner appointment where you less formally spend time with other people who work in the organization. Or you might be asked to give a presentation. These kinds of interviews are common when the recruitment is nationwide, and it's expected you're also trying to consider how you would like living in the area. No matter what type of interview you're in, the employer will be asking qualification questions and behavioral questions. Qualification questions ask you to give more detail about skills and abilities you have that are related to the job. This might include going over work you created in the past, like a portfolio or a brochure or something, or it might just be you answering questions about past work. Behavioral questions might focus a little more on how you handle certain scenarios through a hypothetical question or a tell me about a time when type question. The purpose of a group interview, for example, might be to see how you interact with other people. Some questions are not specific to a job announcement and have more to do with the interviewers trying to form a general idea of how you might be as an employee. In both cases, you want your answers to circle back to the job you are applying for. General questions might be, tell me about yourself, or describe your strengths and weaknesses, or why did you apply for this job? Why are you leaving your current job? Or what interests you about the position? These very general questions that are not tied to specific scenarios are best answered with a general reply, followed by a specific example for how what you are saying about yourself is true. That is, you make a claim and then you support it with an example. Other general questions are tied to scenarios, and they may begin with, tell me about a time when. To answer such questions, you can use what we call the STAR method. S for situation. You explain the context of the scenario you are going to talk about. T is for task. What is the role you have in the scenario? A is for action. What did you do in response to the situation? And R is for result. What was the outcome of the situation? Again, the idea is for you to provide specific information in answer to a general scenario. That's the STAR method. Going back to employer questions, other questions in the interview might be more related to the specific knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required by the job. You can start by turning some of the statements in the job announcement into open-ended questions. An open-ended question is a question that you cannot answer with yes or no. For example, if the job announcement has a list of desired skills and one of them is provide excellent customer service, you can change that into an open-ended question, such as, how would you handle a customer who tells you their experience has been so bad that they will never use your service again? By preparing a list of potential questions or scenarios based on the job announcement, you can practice different ways of answering and using the kind of language that you found in the job announcement or on the organization's website or materials from your research. Make sure you know what all the words mean in a job description and practice talking about the job. This should give you more confidence at the actual interview. Remember to draw connections between your past and your future with the organization. I like to think of an interview as a bridge between your past and your future. If you're asked a question and draw a complete blank, talk yourself through the question. You can say, that's a very interesting question, or thank you for that question, or ask for the question to be repeated, and perhaps an idea will come along. If you really find you have nothing to say, ask if the interviewers are willing to move on and come back to the question later. Remember that if the question asks you to discuss experiences you don't think you have, substitute with similar experience. Prepare to turn your weaknesses into strengths as you anticipate what questions the employer might ask. Answer all the questions. Not answering a question at all will not help you. Again, remember that you're in the interview because you meet the qualifications for the job. Employers are not allowed to make hiring decisions on the basis of certain types of information, such as your age, marital status, parental status, and the like. If an employer asks you a question you think they shouldn't be asking, you'll have to decide how or if to answer the question. As you know, your choice will have a consequence. For example, if an employer asks you how old your kids are, they might just be asking out of curiosity, or because of something they see in your screen background or a photo locket you wear or whatever. You might be perfectly fine answering about your kids, or you might not want to answer that. You will have to choose whether to say, I don't want to answer, or you shouldn't ask me that, or to answer, depending on your level of comfort with the question. An employer's questions also tell you something about the organization, and you can make your decision about taking the job or not. It's a good idea to prepare at least 3 questions in advance of the interview. This way, if a couple of the questions you had were already answered in the employer question phase of the interview, you will still have one prepared question. Your questions can be used to show the employer you have done some research on the organization. A great question to ask is for more detail about what a typical day would look like in the position. This question will give you a lot of insight into whether you will be happy doing the work. You can also base your questions on something that came up in the interview. This shows great active listening skills and demonstrates that you are fully engaged in the process. Again, it's okay to jot down some notes during the interview, as long as you are still mindful of your body language, which we'll discuss here shortly. It's very important that you ask a question or two. Not asking a question may likely be interpreted as a lack of interest. However, you don't want to just ask any question. Avoid asking about facts that you could easily have located yourself using research. And especially avoid asking about work rules that focus on breaks, leave time, or special requests. For example, if you have a vacation planned in a month from when the job starts, wait until you have a job offer to mention it and ask if you will be allowed the time off. If you have a weekly meeting during work hours, wait until you have a job offer to ask if you will be able to adjust your schedule once a week. So now we've talked a lot about getting ready for the interview and how to anticipate, answer, and ask questions, but there's more to communication than words. In fact, there are some studies that suggest that more of your communication is nonverbal than verbal. Verbal just means words. So nonverbal communication is what you are saying with your appearance and body language. Both of these aspects of communication have to do with what people see and what people perceive from your nonverbal habits. Being on time is part of your appearance. If you are late, you will appear not to care. If you are early and hover around too long, you might appear creepy or just be kind of in the way. Please have a look at yourself in the mirror before you arrive. Do this before you tell anyone you have arrived for the interview. If you check in 5 minutes early for an interview and then run to the bathroom mirror, you might not be available when the person comes to bring you to the interview location. If the interview is virtual, by phone or video, be sure that you know the number and access code and have an idea how long it takes you to get logged in. Grooming is about tidiness and cleanliness. Bear in mind that some people are highly sensitive to smell and can even have adverse health reactions to strong aromas. You don't want to offend or harm someone by smelling too bad or too good. Dress in the manner that you believe others in a parallel or similar position would dress. Not everyone in an organization has to dress the same, but you can generally get a feel for the level of formality through observation. You want to strike a middle ground between best and worst dressed. But more importantly, wear clothing that you are comfortable in, that does not require constant adjustments, that does not clash with your video background if that's the kind of interview, and that is the kind of thing you'd be willing to wear every day. Accessories are jewelry, watches, scarves, even shoes. Your nails and makeup and tattoos are not exactly accessories, but they are another thing to consider. This is really where your research on the organization's culture and norms is going to be valuable. There are simply no hard and fast rules across the board on what is acceptable, so you must use your judgment and be aware that your choice of attire and accessories is also a form of communication. This slide gives you an idea of the variety of dress codes at a workplace. And this slide gives you an idea of uniforms that are typical for certain types of jobs. If you know the job you are applying for requires a uniform, dress in your own comfortable but neat and professional clothing to the interview. I've grouped a few different things to consider here under body language. Eye contact, posture, and gesture can say many things about you, so it's good to try yourself out on some friends or family, or even yourself in the mirror or a test video. You want to make good eye contact with everyone in a room, but you don't want to creepily stare at people. You want your body to tell people you're alert and your full attention is on the interview. This means sitting up, not playing with your hair or a string on your sleeve or your bracelet or watch. Gestures are motions you make with your fingers, hands, and arms. Observe yourself in a mirror or on video. Are your hands the centerpiece of attention? Be aware that some gestures could be offensive. If you worry you might gesture too much, you can fold your hands together a little to help, sort of like this. The volume of your voice is how loudly you speak, and tone is what attitude your voice conveys, even if no one could understand the words. If you're able, you can record yourself answering some sample questions to get an idea of your tone and volume of voice. Sometimes modifying your own volume will come naturally as you try to match the volume of the interviewers. Even if you're on a telephone call with no visual component, smiling while you speak has an effect on your tone. I encourage you to experiment a little, saying the same thing with different tones. Choose a tone that seems to you to project confidence and enthusiasm. Remember that you are in the interview because the employer is interested in you. Active listening is about more than just body language, but there is definitely a body language component to active listening insofar as you want to show the audience that you are attentive. Also, as people talk, you can nod or make nonverbal affirmations like mm-hmm or yep. These are other elements to active listening than body language, such as attention to key words in a question or thinking about the assumptions or consequence of a statement. But the body language is also important for letting people know you are paying real attention. The truth is, people like to recognize positive aspects of themselves in other people. That's why you can sort of mirror the interviewer's demeanor if it feels appropriate and comfortable to you. On this slide, we have a list of where our nearest job centers are and also a little bit of information about our mock interview service. If you live near a job center, you can request an in-person mock interview. And if you don't, you can request a virtual mock interview using Zoom or Teams. Please be prepared to provide a copy of the job description for the job you want to practice interviewing for. This helps your job center team create realistic questions for your specific situation. Feel free to reach out to your job center for any questions about this workshop or to schedule a mock interview. This concludes the interviewing workshop. I have enjoyed discussing interviewing best practices with you, and we all here at the Department of Labor wish you the best wherever you are in your career path. Thank you for joining me today.